Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tom Khalil, and welcome to the White House. On behalf of everyone at the White House, I want to congratulate the champions of change we're honoring today for their extraordinary accomplishments as crowdfunding pioneers. So please give it up for our champions of change. As I also want to welcome and celebrate all the other entrepreneurs and innovators in the room today who are together part of this growing crowdfunding community. And as everyone in this room knows, crowdfunding means raising money in small increments from many individuals, but typically using an internet platform. And many people are familiar with how the internet has made it easier for political candidates and charitable organizations to turn many small contributions into big dollars. But today's champions demonstrate how in recent years, many entrepreneurs and innovators have also found success raising money through a growing number of crowdfunding platforms. We're going to hear from the champions who are using crowdfunding to create jobs for our nation's veterans, to accelerate the deployment of solar energy, to revitalize our cities, and to expand the frontiers of citizen science. So we're going to get to hear about underwater robots. I was recently talking to someone who said that there was a crowdfunding campaign underway to develop a tricorder. So those of you who have seen Star Trek before know that that was the thing that Bones used to wave over someone. And so in response to a $10 million grand challenge supported by the Qualcomm, there are entrepreneurs that are actually now working on this. So check it out. So these are all things that things that people can do today under current law, but a new generation of crowdfunding platforms is on the horizon. The Jumpstart Our Business Startups Act, or the JOBS Act, was a bipartisan success story of the president's first term. It includes a provision that will allow startups and small businesses to raise up to $1 million a year from regular investors through crowdfunding platforms. And right now, the Securities and Exchange Commission is in the process of responsibly implementing the rules for this new marketplace. When President Obama signed the JOBS Act, he singled out the crowdfunding provision as a potential game changer, saying, quote, "Because of this bill, startups and small businesses will now have access to a big new pool of potential investors, namely the American people. For the first time, ordinary Americans will be able to go online and invest in entrepreneurs that they believe in." The president understands that entrepreneurship is one of the core strengths of the United States. That's why he's launched an effort called the Startup America. And really this has three pillars. One is what we can do working with Congress to pass legislation that will improve the environment in the United States for starting and growing a business. So for example, we're currently working with Congress to pass comprehensive immigration reform that will include provisions like a startup visa. The second thing is things that the executive branch can do. So we're working to eliminate red tape and accelerate the rate at which ideas move from the lab to the marketplace. And finally, we've been challenging the private sector to take actions that are good for entrepreneurship. And a great example of that is an effort that Steve Case has been leading called the Startup America Partnership, which is working in states and regions across the country to improve the environment for starting and scaling a business. So all these efforts by the Obama administration, by the Congress, and by the private sector will help ensure that America remains the best place on earth to turn a great idea into a great company or a great social enterprise. Crowdfunding, I think, is an inherently democratizing force for innovation and entrepreneurship. It's the 21st century equivalent of barn raising. We can use it to help our neighbors and fellow citizens start a business, enrich our culture, and apply grassroots creativity and imagination to challenges big and small. That's why we're so pleased to honor today's champions of change, and I hope that you will stay with us after today's ceremony to participate in some workshop discussions on crowdfunding. We have policymakers from the administration here today who want your perspective on what's around the corner. And I particularly want to acknowledge Doug Rand on my team has been a leader for the administration in terms of promoting and encouraging crowdfunding. Now we're going to get to hear from the champions themselves. And our first panel is going to be moderated by Greg Nelson, who's the Chief of Staff for the White House National Economic Council. Greg, take it away.
Great. Thanks, Tom. Well, thanks everybody for being here. I have a very easy job, which is to help just facilitate the storytelling of these 6 great crowdfunding entrepreneurs and make sure that you guys both get a chance to hear a little bit about themselves and their stories, but also some dialogue back and forth to get a sense of what we can learn from them, and both from us on the policy side and thinking about how we can move some of these policies forward, but also as entrepreneurs and hopefully other potential crowdfunding entrepreneurs out there in the live stream that'll get a chance to learn from these folks as well. So we're going to keep it real simple. I'm going to go down the row and let everybody have a chance to just introduce themselves, just do a couple of short minutes about their story, and then we'll come back around and do some discussion questions after that. So let me first introduce everybody so you just get a chance to know who's here. Right to my left is Chase Adam. Chase is the founder of Watsy. Next to Chase is Max Hodak. He's the founder of a company called Transcriptic. Amy Curl, the director of Detroit Soup. These are amazing stories. I got a chance to read about them last night, so you guys will have a blast. Emily Nunez, who's the CEO and co-founder of Sword and Plow. She's also a U.S. Army intelligence officer. Premal Shah, who's the president and co-founder of Kiva. And Noah Wibsnyder, who's the founder of Peeled Snacks. So Chase, why don't we start with you, and we'll just work our way down the row.
Great. I'll get us started. So my name is Chase Adam, and I work with Watsy, and we're a crowdfunding platform for healthcare. So basically, anyone can go on our website at watsy.org, donate as little as $5, and directly fund a life-changing medical treatment for someone in need. And so a little bit of quick background just on where the idea came from. About 2 years ago, I was serving in the Peace Corps in Central America, and I was traveling on a bus, and a woman got on the bus and started asking all of the local passengers for donations to pay for her son's medical treatment. Now, I was initially skeptical. I think anytime someone you don't know asks you for money, you're skeptical. But what I noticed pretty quickly was that almost all of the local passengers started giving donations to this woman, and I couldn't understand why. And it turns out that this woman actually had her son's medical record with her. And she was passing her son's medical record around the bus. The local passengers were grilling her with questions, and she really seemed to earn their trust. So everyone, probably 2/3 of the bus donated. I gave $2. I didn't want to be that one stingy gringo that didn't donate. The woman got off the bus, and I just had an epiphany, and I thought, we can crowdfund movies on Kickstarter. We can crowdfund fundraisers on Indiegogo. Why is there not a website whereby we can directly fund medical treatments for people that need them? So that was really inspiration for Watsy. Put together a great group of people, 2 of whom are right back there. We basically just worked nights and weekends. We built Watsy for like $3,000. We launched the website about 8 months ago. On the first day we launched, we had over 20,000 people hit the site. We funded every single medical treatment we had posted. We had the humble goal of doing 10 medical treatments in 6 months, and we did 10 treatments, I think, in probably our first week. So that's a quick background on Watsy. Would love if you guys checked it out, watsy.org.
Thanks, Chase. Awesome. Max, go ahead.
Yeah, well, that's a pretty cool story. Not really sure I'm going to follow that. So I'm the founder of Transcriptic. We're not a crowdfunding platform. We're one of the beneficiaries of crowdfunding. The Transcriptic came out of my experiences as an undergrad at Duke in biomedical engineering. We found that basic life science research was just incredibly labor intensive. It took a long time at the bench moving small volumes of translucent liquids from one place to another. If you made a mistake, you wouldn't necessarily find out for weeks until you'd spent a lot more money on that sample. So with a background in web, it's like in web, when you're writing too many semicolons, people invent new programming languages to make it easier. So we asked, what would cloud computing as applied to life sciences look like? And so we've built a robotic infrastructure whereby researchers, rather than doing the biology by hand at their bench, can just code up their experimental protocols, upload them to our system, and then we'll run the biology on our automation remotely so that they don't have any of these costs of building a lab or any of the time of doing it by hand, and we can make that a lot more accessible. When we started the company, we raised traditional venture capital, but we also did an offering through Second Market where about 70 smaller dollar angel investors participated in a round. So in the end, we'd had, rather than 5 investors we had, 75 investors. And that wasn't Jobs Act crowdfunding, they were all accredited investors, but it was a really different interaction. It was really interesting to see them, and now it's changed the tone of how you hear a lot of people talk about our company in Silicon Valley, rather than just, oh, there's all the reasons that this won't work. Now it's, oh yeah, they've bought into that, so they want to try and help solve those problems. But yeah, so that's my story.
It's a great story. Amy?
Well, my name is Amy Caherl. I am the director of Detroit Soup. So I'm here to talk about the city that I love so, so dearly, and kind of maybe squelch some of the negative stereotypes that you might have about the murder capital of the world. So Detroit Soup, though, is a micro-granting dinner that funds creative projects for the city of Detroit. You pay $5. You get soup, salad, bread, and a vote. We meet in this beautiful old film studio that was turned another church, and then turned into a tax foreclosure. And what happened was we meet, we gather, we listen to 4 different creative projects, anywhere from art, social entrepreneurship, technology, education, anything that's looking to make Detroit better. These presenters get 4 minutes to share their idea. They get 4 questions from the diners. And then we have a chance to eat, vote, and whoever has the most votes at the end of the night wins the money from the door. So at this point, we've had Detroiters give back to Detroiters over $30,000 towards creative initiatives. It's created 7 nonprofits, 3 small businesses. We've now moved into neighborhood initiatives because we're really supporting the idea that neighbors really can talk with neighbors. A lot of times in neighborhood coalition meetings, you're getting talked at rather than getting to talk together. And Soup's just an amazing way to connect, share ideas, share resources. And we're really just excited to be in the city, just have the amazing opportunity to connect with a city that's looking to revitalize and to look for new energy and to look for fascinating new ideas to take a post-industrial city from where it's at to something really incredible and something that I don't think can really happen almost anywhere else.
Emily, go ahead.
Hello, my name is Emily Nunez, and I'm one of the co-founders of Sword and Plow. And we are a social enterprise that works with manufacturers that employ veterans to repurpose military surplus materials into stylish bags, such as this one right here. The materials include parachutes, tents, laundry bags, all materials that would otherwise be destined for the landfill when they're deemed unserviceable. And this idea really started last year at Middlebury College. I was a senior, and I was attending the Center for Social Entrepreneurship Symposium, which was founded and helped by Alan Hassenfeld. And I was listening to Jacqueline Novogratz, the founder of Acumen, give a speech about how another company was incorporating recycling into their business model. And I just thought, what in my life is routinely wasted that could be harnessed and repurposed for a powerful mission? And growing up in a military family and just attending the U.S. Army Airborne School the summer before, I was inspired to do something that would empower veteran employment while also reducing waste and really strengthening the understanding between civilians and the military. And so the idea was hatched last January, and this spring, in April, we launched our Kickstarter campaign over the course of 30 days with the goal of raising $20,000. And we were just overwhelmed with support from our backers, totaling over 1,500 backers supporting our mission. Our goal was to raise $20,000, and we ended the campaign with a little over $300,000, which has really enabled us to really kickstart our business and run our first big manufacturing run. And while that is over, you can still find us on www.swordandplow.com. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Premal Shah and I help lead Kiva.org. Kiva is a website that believes in social lending for social good. And The Kiva.org website now has been around for about 7 years, and in that time, about 3 months ago, we just crossed our 1 millionth entrepreneur that has received a loan on the website. And the way that the Kiva.org model has worked is usually there's an organization on the ground, typically a microfinance institution, that vets the entrepreneur and then posts their story up online. And Kiva now works in 70 countries, often bridging people on the other side of not only financial inclusion, the financial divide, but also the digital divide. But as technology spread, we wondered what would happen if we could move from an institutional-based underwriting approach to a social underwriting approach. And we launched something called Kiva Zip recently. Kiva Zip is a website where anyone in this room right now could go and vouch for someone that they believe in that needs a loan to start a small business or grow their small business. The way it works, I'll illustrate it through a story. In San Francisco, where I'm from, there's a woman named Rocio, and Rocio is a house cleaner. And she basically has kids. She has to, drop them off at school, pick them up after work, but then during the day, kind of bring around her vacuum cleaner on a city bus, to visit different clients. She needed $3,000 to buy an automobile. If she could do that, she would miss less of appointments. She missed quite a few appointments, quite a lot of appointments over the holidays. She was unable to get a loan from a bank, and to put a fine point on that, 7 out of 10 small businesses that apply for a loan from a bank here in the US get rejected. She couldn't get a loan from a bank, but there was another Kiva borrower on the website who had been repaying his loan successfully. And because he had been repaying his loan successfully, kind of like on the eBay system where if you start shipping the items on time, you get a good feedback score, this man, Victor, who had been paying back his loan, could vouch for Rocio. Rocio now has been paying back her loan successfully. She has a car. She's able to kind of meet her client demands, pick up her kids at school, drop them off. And now she's vouched for Eva, who sells at local flea markets in the Bay Area. And it's a way of basically reaching people for whom the credit score might say one picture, but it doesn't really count character. And we're looking at how we can use new models to underwrite and reach people, the estimated 10 million micro businesses here in the US, and 5 employees or fewer, that are left out of this system today. And there's a great stat from AEO and others who's in the audience that if just 1 in 3 micro businesses in the US could hire 1 employee, we would be at full employment. So we're really excited about that, and we hope you check it out at Kiva Zip.
Fantastic. Thank you. Noah?
Hi, everybody. I'm Noah Weipsnyder, and these are peeled snacks, organic fruit snacks with no added sugar and no added preservatives. So they taste great, and they're really good and make you feel good about what you're eating. You may have seen them in Starbucks and Hudson News, in Whole Foods, Wegmans, Giant, grocery stores, rolling out around the country. I came up with the inspiration for peeled snacks when I was working at a large food company. And I realized that large food companies are really good at processing food and adding a bunch of sugar and chemicals and preservatives to them. And I also learned that 80% of food in grocery stores are loaded with added sugar, and that is one of the primary reasons why we have so many chronic diseases in this country, from obesity to diabetes to heart disease to even cancer. And I was inspired to come up with a snack that tasted good, is actually good for you, and is convenient for people when we are all so busy and running around and needing food on the go. So I launched Peeled Snacks in 2004, and as you can imagine, taking on the food industry and building a food company takes a lot of money. And we've been raising money from individuals for a while, and last year we were thankful to partner with Circle Up, which is a crowdfunding platform that launched about last year. And it was wonderful. It was so great to have a whole new network of new investors who are excited about our mission to really bring about healthy snacks and really wanted to support us as we go through all of our growth. It's such a big change, especially in food. You know, it's not sexy tech company. It's real food. It's something that takes a long time to build and really requires putting a lot of time and effort into it. So it's really wonderful to have a whole new source of funding to be able to work with people on the ground who really valued not only the profit side, but also the mission side of our business.
That's great. Thank you. Awesome. Well, all incredibly exciting and inspiring stories. Thank you guys for coming to share them with us today. I wanted to just ask a couple of questions to get you guys going in a couple of different categories. The first I wanted to start with is looking at financing a bit. Max and Noah, you guys both did sort of, sounds like a combination of crowdfunding and accredited investors. And I wondered if you could talk a bit about the decisions you made to try to do that and how you balance that, and in some cases I think actually had to create some new investing models to allow that to happen and have that mix happen. If you guys could talk about that, that'd be great.
Sure. So so since the SEC rules for jobs at crowdfunding aren't available yet, we really only took money from accredited investors at this point. There wasn't a pre-sale or donation model that I think made sense for us. But that said, we ran almost all of our seed financing through a site called AngelList, which is as close to Kickstarter as the tech startup community has. It's basically a Kickstarter for accredited investors and tech companies. And that really changed the way that we raised. So this is actually my second company. In my first company, we raised our first round. Traditionally, you go up and down Sand Hill Road, pitching VCs, you take meetings, you follow up, and that was a much more painful experience than running it through AngelList. And then the second market integration came along a bit later down the road, almost as we were just closing the round. And that was through AngelList. Second Market got in touch with us saying that they were thinking about doing this integration. They wanted to know if we'd be interested in trying it out. So we said we'd check it out, and we were the first ones to go through that, and it went relatively smoothly. Traditionally when you'd find some introduction to a VC, you'd take a meeting, you'd wait a week, you'd send them another email, versus when our AngelList profile was first sent out by Team AngelList, we got, I think, it was seen by 3,000 investors. I got about 200 emails, which led to about 50 phone calls over the course of about a week. It's a very different experience.
Yeah, definitely. So similarly, our crowdfunding experience was also through accredited investors, because we can't go down the path of individual investors yet who are not accredited. It's interesting because my sister, who's here with me, and I were talking about this last year, where she said, "What do you mean I can't just put money into your company? Who's the government to tell me I can't just invest in your company?" So I do think that when the Jobs Act is fully implemented, it'll be amazing to be able to really harness our network and be able to not only get investors from our community and from all of the people who are fans of peeled snacks, but also to be able to make peeled snacks available to them, to really to really democratize the process and really make it a participatory process where everyone can be a part of it and can help us grow and can join in the profit that comes from that. In food, there are venture capitalists and bankers, but typically they don't get involved with small businesses. They become involved at a much larger stage. And so even where we are today, the options that we have are still very much limited to individual investors. And so even prior to working with Circle Up, we still were very much focused on meeting with individual investors and talking to angels. So we went through the whole credit card debt, and all of our friends and family put money in, and then we got angel investors in, and then Circle Up was a great next step where it was angel investors, but not necessarily people within our network.
Makes sense. I'm going to shift gears a little bit and ask Emily and Amy a question. Primal had mentioned the word character as something that they're doing on Kiva Zip as a way to help vouch for people. I get the sense that in one of the real powerful elements of crowdfunding is the ability for people to see that authenticity and to kind of get to know the people that they're investing in addition to the product. I wonder if you guys could talk a bit about how you've, for Detroit Soup, you've been doing this for a little while, and for Sword and Plowshare, Sword and Plow, you've just started, how you could kind of share your character and authenticity with your potential supporters and make sure that they see and continue to be invested in what you're doing.
Sure, I'll start it off. Well, we really chose Kickstarter as a way to show our character and what our team was really about. And I think one of the best parts about Kickstarter or other similar crowdfunding platforms is the ability to make a video with your entire team. And we had great help from our communications director, Heike Kavuchin. But just to be able to really tell your story before launching your real website. We also are trying to incorporate more stories of the veteran sewers themselves in the future. So we just thought that storytelling aspect of the crowdfunding website was really key to share our character and story with our backers.
I think for us, for me, I think we try to create a really safe space for people to feel good about walking into something of an unknown. You don't know who is going to be presenting. You don't know the projects ahead of time. And I think for us, creating an environment that's why there's food. Because you know how to eat food. It's something that we know how to eat around a table. And our tables are old boards and doors on milk crates, sitting on a beautifully refinished floor in the middle of the North End neighborhood, which has a lot of abandoned buildings around you. And for us, when you walk in and there's these huge walls and these beautiful skylights, and there's music playing that you might be familiar, and you see food, and there's something to do, because when you walk into a room and you don't really know people, what do? You go to your phone and you talk to your neighbor. And so we do it where we have the proposals first and then the food, because now we've had a shared experience together. And now I can easily turn to Max and go, hey, well, what project do you want to vote for? And you'd be like, well, I grew up doing X, and this is the project that I really liked, or I really liked what this woman really had to say because it affects my community or it affects my neighborhood, or wow, I never even thought about that. Can you help me understand what you're seeing? And so you see these relationships forming. You see people coming together. I think all of a sudden, Detroiters, there's a lot of us, but not a lot of us at the same time. And we need to know who our teammates are. And this is a really great way to do that, is to kind of find out who these other players are within the community who are looking to support, and just to kind of cross the divide of going, well, what's going on in this city, and how can we get involved and invested? And I think that's really beautiful about Detroit, is that it's really small and that we all know each other and we want to support each other. And SOUP allows that platform and the experience and the opportunity to make that happen.
That's great. That's a great story. All right, I'm going to turn to the two crowdfunding platforms that are here as well. Primo, I wanted to ask you a question. You guys Kiva was one of the first to really get going in this space, and it's exciting to hear about Kiva Zip and how trying out some new innovative things as well. But how, in looking back at the last 7 years, but also seeing this kind of dynamism around you, how have you seen this change people's relationship to investing, to in this case charitable giving, and how they're supporting that work, and where do you see that going over the next couple of years as more and more people get engaged in this kind of space and see the opportunities to do something innovative like what Chase and team have done?
Sure. I mean, Chase, we couldn't be more excited about what you're doing at WOTC. If you actually go to their website and you actually read the stories of the patients that are seeking funding, it's impossible, literally, I think, not to want to chip in. And I think one question we should be asking ourselves is, what idea or concept in our lifetime do we want to make absurd? And if you think about it, 20 years ago or 30 years ago, people were on airplanes smoking, or you'd be in a restaurant and, the waiter would walk up to you and be smoking. And now, culturally, that's an absurd idea, and the culture has changed. And I think what's absurd today is that you can't connect with someone who has a great idea, wants an opportunity. You can't walk right down the street and you can buy get your shoe shine from somebody, or you can buy a falafel from someone, but we know the top 3 constraints for a business is capital, or we know there's a lot of patients who go in need, or a lot of students who make the grades but can't get in. And so I think it'll just be the new normal over the next 10 years, just like we were maybe afraid to use something like eBay and buy something from a complete stranger, and now every minute an automobile is sold on that website. I think the new normal over the next 10 years will be really being able to see people, because when you can see someone, that creates an empathy, and when you have that empathy, that creates a connection, a generosity, and you're willing to basically be a part of their story as a partner, not necessarily as a donor, but as a partner, you know that your life and their life is tied in something significant.
Chase, if you want to discuss similarly, you guys are relatively new in this space, but the number of people you've already reached is remarkable. Talk about some of the feedback you've gotten, especially, I imagine, healthcare is it's often a hard thing for people to approach, and you're selling kind of a story and an outcome rather than a product, and how that's gotten people engaged.
Yeah, I think Prem will hit the nail on the head. Crowdfunding isn't really anything new. I think we've been crowdfunding. I think 5 guys each pulling together 5 pieces of obsidian 17,000 years ago to buy a cow, like that was crowdfunding. Or a man on the street asking for quarters, that's crowdfunding. Last year I think there were $300 billion donated in the United States, and 73% of that came from individuals, right? That's crowdfunding. But what the internet has done is it's made crowdfunding more accessible, and it's made it more transparent. So instead of the Red Cross going out and collecting thousands of small donations and then allocating those funds for disaster relief in Haiti, people are now able to establish direct connections. And going back to what Premel said, I think that's what really excites us. Our mission is to connect people and save lives, but the connecting people part's a lot more important. Just establishing meaningful, dignified connections between human beings. So if I asked Greg, for example, Greg, if I said that Max was likely going to die in 10 minutes unless you pitched in $500, would you pitch in $500 for Max? You would, right? I don't think no one in this room would not pitch in $5 for Max. I would give everything I had, my entire savings, everything, to save Max's life, because Max is here and I've heard him talk and I can see him and he's a human being, right? But why do we live in a world where 1 billion people, 1/6 of the planet, can't afford basic health care? And why don't we care? We don't care because we don't know them. And so all we're trying to do, I think Kiva is doing the exact same thing, is we're trying to establish real connections between people. And we think that by just establishing a human connection between 2 individuals, we can actually solve the world's greatest problems. So that's what we're trying to do.
Awesome. Well, hopefully we'll establish some more of those connections today. And we've got another great panel of champions coming up, and I'm going to invite Doug and the next Champions of Change to come up and join us. But for those of you who are here in the room, we hope you'll stick around and help do some of the workshops this afternoon. We've got a lot more we can do in this space, so we need your thoughts and ideas to do it. So thank you guys. You guys are inspiring and wonderful for us.
Okay. Well, my name is Doug Rand. I serve as a senior policy advisor here at the White House in the Office of Science and Technology Policy. And I am extraordinarily delighted to share the stage with 6 more of the crowdfunding pioneers that we honor today as champions of change. So as you know, I'd like to introduce each of these champions first, then I'll ask them each to take a couple of minutes to tell their stories, and then we'll have some time for a little bit of Q&A that we can hopefully all learn from. So from my left, the champions are Aurora Anaya Cerda, founder of La Casa Azul Bookstore, Michelle Clark, Executive Director of the Youth Employment Partnership, Marcin Jakubowski, founder Global Village Construction Set, Peter Plotzer, co-founder and CEO of NanoSatisfy, Andrea Seabrook, host and founder of Decode DC, and Eric Stackpole, co-founder of Open ROV. So with that, Aurora, let's begin with your story.
Great, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. It's an honor to be here. My name is Aurora. I'm the owner and founder of La Casa Azul Bookstore in East Harlem. And the bookstore was a journey. I opened that bookstore just last year. This Saturday, we celebrated our 1-year anniversary. But it actually took me over 6 years to plan out the bookstore, to do the research, to learn about running a business, to learn about funding, writing a business plan. But at the same time, I was also developing relationships and connecting with authors. What makes La Casa Azul Bookstore special is that we are the only bookstore in New York, and really the only bookstore on the East Coast that focuses specifically on Latino literature and anything having to do with Latino art and culture. But the funding didn't come, even though I was learning about business and and meeting authors and publishers and really learning all I could about how to run a bookstore and really a business. It took me almost 4 years of being rejected by every single bank you can think of for me to think of something different to do. And at the same time, I was also actually supporting and crowdfunding other projects from friends who created films, traveled to different countries, and I thought, why don't I try that platform for myself and see if it's something that could work out for the bookstore. And looking back at the relationships I had built and kind of being on the other side of being a funder, I gave it a shot, and in the fall of 2011, I launched the 40K in 40 Days campaign, and we were able to raise the money that we needed for East Harlem to finally have a bookstore, which it did not have. And just this Saturday, we celebrated 1 year of being in El Barrio, and also within the year that we've been open, over 200 programs that we've had, book signings, author talks, but also we've become more of a community space, although at the core we are a bookstore, and that is what we sell. We are an experience, and people come from all over the country. Funders come from all over the country. People that I have never met come to the store and say, I gave to your campaign a year ago, and that has happened throughout the entire year. And some of those programs also include film festivals and just meetings. People need a meeting space in El Barrio, and Casa Azul Bookstore has become that.
Thanks. Hi, I'm Michelle Clark, and I'm the director of the Youth Employment Partnership. And I think the theme here might be a journey, and that YEP is a job training agency that was founded a ton of years ago, 40 years ago, by school teachers that got tired of kids going backwards. But to stay current with the needs of our teens and young adults in Oakland and how to change the trajectory of their workforce development and their education, we've had to really evolve over time. And so we've done that through a variety of living classroom environments. And we're a beneficiary of crowdfunding because it created one of the most innovative living classrooms for us, in that we worked with Solar Mosaic, now they're Mosaic, to fund a solar system for our agency. And it creates a living classroom environment for our young people to learn about solar and solar education, as well as it helps to bring our agency to self-sufficiency. And so now we own our building, and now we own our solar system. And so as we have more and more financial stability, we have more and more flexibility on how we pilot our ventures, how we move in different directions. This was, the journey to this point is long and way out of the scope of this conversation, but I think what's so important now is that there's really a new chapter that's opened by crowdfunding for us. What we learned from this process and the mentorship of Mosaic will make crowdfunding available to us and accessible for all different types of economic development projects that we're always working on with our youth. And so that's kind of the beginning and now to the current story of YP.
Okay, thank you. I'm glad to be here. So my name is Marcin, founder of Open Source Ecology, the project. I want to talk back as far as where the motivation comes from for this. So when I was 7, tanks were rolling down my street. This is Poland. No, this wasn't a parade. This was the real time of material scarcity back during the behind the Iron Curtain. So I never forgot about those things that, the constraints that people are under when we're pressed for resources and people struggle for opportunity. So that's a theme that sticks out. So then moved to the US, things were great, went to Princeton, got a PhD in fusion energy at University of Wisconsin-Madison, and I discovered that I was useless. So I started a farm in Missouri, and this was the birth of the Open Source Ecology project. We're pretty true to the crowdfunding route. So basically, about a year or two into the project, I ran out of cash, so I started crowdfunding. So basically put up the project online, started getting donations. I wanted to build machines, build things like tractors that kept breaking, that I bought them and they kept breaking. So I wanted to build them myself. I did just that, found that industrial productivity can be achieved on a small scale. And that was initially through crowdfunding. Then we've done things like Kickstarter. Right now, we have a program called True Fans. So the millions of you watching this sign up. But basically, there's people people out there, basically I asked them, contribute $10 for 24 months, and right now we have about 500 true fanships, so that's a constant base that funds us right now. Now, the goal is to create, with the Open Source Ecology project, we're working on 50 industrial machines that it takes to build a small civilization with modern comforts. And that's really, we're leveraging the power of crowdfunding, crowd collaboration to develop these machines. And the real deal is to develop a certain level of efficiency of tapping the crowd channels. So last year we built our compressed earth brick press in a single day. And our milestone for this year, and I'll just leave with that, our milestone for this year is to demonstrate that we can design one complex machine with about 250 people in a single day. So that's it for me. Thanks.
Welcome, everyone. I'm Peter from NanoSatisfy. We are a space exploration company that gives high school students access to a satellite, program it, and control it for a true hands-on experience in science. We started both with a big problem and need that we saw in our society and a big passion. And the need is that we just don't have enough graduates in science, technology, engineering, and math, or STEM, but they are crucial for our economic growth. And we started with also our passion, which is inspiration for space, and using that inspirational drive in giving students a truly hands-on experience. And so a year ago, we went on Kickstarter with our first satellite, ArduSat, and said, if you want to support this, we will give you time to run your own space experiment. And we wanted to raise $35,000, and about 35 days later, we set on $106,000. Students, schools, all across the world, but a lot from the United States, wanting to make this project a reality. We got support from the financing community who really saw that those guys that want to do something different here, they really want to help us move forward and stay on the cutting edge of innovation. We used AngelList and Second Market as well as shared beforehand. And today, 10 months later, we've created 10 jobs. We have about 1,000 students across the world. They're going to use our satellites. They're going to be launched on August 5th. We have pilot project plans with about a dozen schools. And we're constantly looking for more schools. We want to have, in 5 years, 500,000 students in this country in high school have used our satellite for a true hands-on experience in science and technology and realize that programming isn't hard, physics is actually fun, and you can actually make the world a better place. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Andrea Seabrook. I am the host and founder of Decode DC. You can find us at decodedc.com. We're a public radio show and podcast. We are on a bunch of public radio stations now around the country, but mainly we're a podcast. I'm a journalist. I covered Congress for the better part of a decade, and I was at NPR for about 15 years, 14 and change. And two things contributed to this project, I think, at the foundation. One was a big story I did with the Planet Money team at NPR for This American Life, where we really got into the minds of members of Congress running for Congress again, and we found that many of them have the goal, wake up in the morning every day with the goal to raise $10,000 a day. They raise $10,000 a day toward their re-election campaign. To me, that's an accountability problem. They are accountable to their funders rather than to the American people. We have the same accountability problem in the media. I once saw a very important government official, I won't say who, talking about your security on a TV network, and the network kind of whooshed them down to the corner and brought up a dog trapped on ice in New Jersey. And the purpose, of course, was to keep your eyeballs glued to the TV through the commercial. That's what I mean by accountability problem. So when I decided to strike out on my own, I wanted to be accountable to my listeners and them alone. And so going to Kickstarter was absolutely just a no-brainer for me and for Lena Masitsis, my producer. We set a very high goal, and we passed it by 25%. We made $100,000 in 23 days, the most stressful 23 days of my life. And we have managed to put out a series of shows that goes on that tells the story of accountability problems in the United States and problems with the media and with our government. And we're very, very proud of what we've been able to do, and we keep going. And let me just say hello to my 7-year-old Sophia, who is also here. Big supporter.
Cool. These are all really great stories. Everyone, I'm Eric Stackpole, and I'm co-founder of OpenROV. We build underwater robots. They're these little shoebox-sized, remotely operated vehicles, and they've got a camera on board. And that camera streams live video up to the surface, so you can see what the robot sees and drive it around, a lot like playing a video game. And the genesis of this was, I guess it kind of started just personally being really interested in exploration. Like Peter, I've always loved space exploration and being able to go to distant lands that have never been seen before. And it occurred to me that we've got an unexplored land right next to us with alien creatures and weird geological features and maybe archaeology from eons ago that's never been seen. And it's right off our coastline. Underwater is this completely unknown, dark, mysterious place. And with technology, we can now explore it. It's like having the first metal detector. There's all this stuff that's there, and we've never been able to see it before, and we can go there. So a few years back, I was building kind of a prototype of this at a place called Tech Shop, which is kind of this place that has a lot of tools. It's kind of like a gym, but instead of being able to use the treadmill, you get to use a milling machine or a laser cutter. And so I was building this robot, and through a mutual friend, I met my co-founder, David Lang, and he was really learning about this right at the right time, this make movement where people using off-the-shelf parts can put things together on their own that do amazing things. And so he and I kind of worked together to build this community, which became OpenROV. It's this online website that we've had where the design for our robot, design tips, ideas about where you can deploy it are all made available. We're free and completely open source. So at first it was just he and me talking back and forth on the forums. There weren't that many people doing it. But we started going to cool places. There was this underwater cave that had never been explored way up in the mountains near where I grew up, and we explored that. And I think that landed us a story in the New York Times that got more people interested and more people interested. And we launched a Kickstarter project last year with a goal to raise $20,000. The idea of this is that would be enough money that we could send out a few kits to developers and tinkerers who want to be a part of this development process. We ended up getting that in about 2.5 hours, and we just kept on going. So at the end, we raised well over $100,000. We've now shipped ROVs across the world to many, many countries. There's more than 300 of them out there. The big idea is that it shouldn't take a research grant to do exploration. It should take curiosity, and we're trying to provide a tool that will allow everyone to explore. We're trying to democratize exploration, and so that's what we're all about.
All right, thank you again. These are all phenomenal stories. And to follow up, I guess I wanted to start with a question that I think links up Aurora and Andrea's story. So each of you had this vision to create something culturally powerful that had never been done before. And you decided to use crowdfunding to validate your idea. Now, one point that hasn't come up yet, I think understandably, is that a huge number of crowdfunding campaigns are not successful. We have obviously a selection bias issue when we're honoring champions of change. We're really glad you've all been successful. I believe some very high percentage of crowdfunding campaigns on any crowdfunding platform you look like do not hit their target, and the money is returned to all of the potential donors or investors. So knowing that was the issue, that it was all or nothing, you were going to get your 40K, you were going to get your target, or it was going to be pack up and go home. Why did you decide to go forward? What was that experience like, and what made you confident, if indeed you were confident, that your potential supporters would really get behind your vision?
I was very confident until the moment that I put that number up there and pressed start. And then for the next 25 days or 23 days or whatever it was, as I said, the most stressful of my life. We made our goal 2 days before the end of the campaign. And one of the amazing things that about crowdfunding, especially using this is using Kickstarter. Other platforms do it different ways. But there's a sense of urgency when you get closer to the end. People sort of, start tweeting and saying, "Is she going to make it?" So that itself, it's funded by the story. Is she going to make it? For me, I felt like I was taking my natural fan base from public radio, from my work in public radio, and saying, hey, let's do this differently. I believe NPR is the gold standard of news. Let's take it a step further. Let's dig into this problem we have in the United States with our governance today. And people are desperate for that message. They want it, and they are willing to put their own money behind it. And as a journalist, there is nothing more inspiring than going to the Capitol with the names of those 1,600 backers in my head and being their proxy in the United States Capitol, funded by them and no one else. I think that it's an amazing story, and it couldn't have happened this way without easy crowdfunding. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Very similar to Andrea's story, I also didn't sleep for 40 days. That's how I feel. Like everyone says, how did you do it? I really didn't sleep for 40 days. I was working full time, trying to crowdfund and tweet and Facebook, really using social media as my platform. But like I said earlier, this was a process that I had been working on since 2006. So throughout the process, for over 5-6 years, I was known already in El Barrio as, that's Aurora, she wants to open a bookstore. Do you know her? She's opening a bookstore. And that was kind of like my intro everywhere. Either myself or someone would say she's opening a bookstore. So I was like, okay, I really have to open it now because everyone's expecting it. But then I also, I had launched a website, casaazulbookstore.com, as a test in 2008 to see if it was not just me who wanted this to happen, but were there really other people interested in buying books online through an independent bookstore. And my cell phone number was posted on the website at the time because we didn't have a landline, I didn't have a bookstore. And for 4 years, I was getting calls to my phone. I'm in El Barrio, where is your store? I'm coming to New York, I don't see the address on your website. And I'd have to say for 4 years, that's because we don't have an address. That's because we don't exist as a brick and mortar space yet. So when I did begin to fund other projects and I saw the response and I saw the success of other friends of mine who had done similar things as far as meeting their goal, learning from them, doing the research, nothing that I've done with Casa Azul Bookstore has been without the research. And it wasn't something that I did overnight. It did take over 6 years to build. And that social capital that I had developed, the relationships that I had built throughout the years, and then the 433 funders that gave were people from El Barrio who would message me and say, here's my $20 or my $40 because East Harlem needs a bookstore. I grew up in the neighborhood, there was never a bookstore there. Or I'm from Oregon, and I think every city should have a bookstore like this. So all these people coming together from different communities of readers, of people in publishing, or just people that knew of the importance of books in their community that would say, reading saved my life. So not sleeping for 40 days and really just counting and knowing that the people that I had met throughout the 6 years knew of my passion and my dedication to the bookstore, and just taking that leap of faith and saying, we're going to go for it.
Great, thank you so much. My next question links up Michelle and Peter, because you both represent quite different examples of democratizing access to sophisticated technology. So, in Michelle's case, you're lowering the cost of renewable electricity. In Peter's case, you're lowering the cost of space exploration. And that in and of itself is a big accomplishment, but each of you have chosen to add this really crucial education component. So how does crowdfunding help you serve that educational mission in particular?
Well, with YEP, the young people that come to YEP come to us often because they have very significant educational deficits. And these are young people without some very serious intervention won't successfully transition to self-sufficiency or healthy adulthood. And so we use everything to turn it into an educational experience. And so crowdfunding has so many interesting platforms as well as solar. So for us, it was kind of made in heaven. Like most of our businesses, we deconstructed buildings and run lumber businesses. And so we taught machinery as well as how to move lumber into different markets. We have a 26,000 square foot facility, and so now the energy is all 100% provided through the solar system now, and it's trackable. It's trackable on the wall. It's trackable through our graphs. We have our spreadsheets of our past energy bills and our savings. We talk about what that money could be used for differently, and so and at this point also, just to make young people more marketable, you have to have basic green education as well as an understanding of new systems in our society. So it gives us this opportunity to have hands-on, very visible. We built this great stairway where they go to the roof and they see the solar system. And so it's as tangible as you can get. But the biggest value is about math education. And crowdfunding is really just extensive math education. And how do you get people to buy in to the math that you know is possible, right? And so it's a very energizing process of getting them to think about math differently than classroom math, right? To really think about math as how math and engagement can change their lives, their facilities, and their neighborhoods. And so it's just a wonderful environment for us to create this living classroom.
I mean, I think as you have just said very, very passionately, the need for education that is hands-on and get students involved in the STEM fields is quite obvious. And if you ask like a 4-year-old, what are they passionate or interested, most of them say dinosaurs, robots, and space. And unfortunately, space has always been like way out there, behind the TV, and the current generation has lost contact with it. And so I think what crowdfunding allowed us to do is get out there and tell our story very vividly and publicly that you can be a space explorer. Rocket science is not hard. And it allowed us to tell the story very, very publicly. I mean, we got covered in like 250 media channels literally across the world throughout our crowdfunding campaign. And I'm happy to share that I also didn't sleep for 40 days. So, I mean, I think that's like, that's one common theme. And I'm pretty sure you didn't sleep, Eric didn't sleep any much either. But what then comes from that is that you actually get called up by Kleiner Perkins and says, hey, I want to talk to you, right? We now have a contract with NASA Ames that has been very, very supportive because they hear about you. So what crowdfunding allows you is to connect with people who care about the problem, like, for example, STEM education. And even though publicly everyone talks about, but when you actually show up on Sand Hill Road and says, give me money to solve our education problem, everyone suddenly has an appointment, right? And with the Kickstarter campaign, you get out there, and there are actually people that care about it. And then they come, they help you fund, they find you people, you find employees. Like getting access to phenomenal engineers is really, really hard in Silicon Valley. But we are out there, we are on 2 platforms, so we have thousands of people that hear about us. And there are enough people out there that are coming from a Cornell or from an MIT or from a Stanford who actually love space. And they say, I want to work in a space exploration company and I'm sick and tired of Twitter 2.0, right? Because everyone is doing social media. So I think a lot of the value of crowdfunding is in reaching a much, much broader audience, both for financial support, but also for people who says, I continue to get emails, hey, I want to be on your satellite. I'm a school. Eric and I met through the NASA Space App Challenge and had groups across the world hack on our satellites and his phenomenal open ROV robot. So that ability to reach a broader community, I think, has really, changed the landscape for starting small businesses in local communities, but with a much, much broader reach.
Great, thank you. So the next question is for Marcin and Eric. As everybody's heard, you're creating open source hardware platforms, which has a lot of analogies to the open source software movement that everyone by now is a beneficiary of, whether they realize it or not. It's earlier days for open source hardware, and you're both great examples of that. What do you see as the future of open source hardware? At this confluence of crowdfunding and crowdsourcing ideas, both for your own work, in the case of Open ROV, solving an important grand challenge of exploring the world's oceans, which are all but unknown, or in your case, addressing how to feed billions of people sustainably. there's a lot of other grand challenges out there that the president's focused on, that we're all focused on here, that I think everyone in this room thinks about a lot. What other grand challenges do you think are addressable by this combination of open source hardware and crowdfunding?
Eric, you want to start?
Sure.
That's a great question. Yeah, I'm really excited about the potential of open hardware. If you're familiar with open source software, the big idea is that the code that makes a certain program work is accessible to anyone. So you can kind of open the hood and tinker with something. You can fix a bug or add a modification. It's a lot like how someone might work on their car. Well, actually, that's a pretty good analogy for hardware too. And I think the potential of open hardware is even greater. As an example, OpenROV is completely open source and open hardware. So someone can download the plans for our design and build it themselves. But now it's not just another mind contributing to it. Like if it were open source, someone has to take their expertise and their time to work on something. But now it may be someone who lives in a different environment. Maybe they can test the ROV in a cold place if they live in Michigan, or a warm place if they live in Florida. They have a different background. Maybe they used to be a car mechanic, or maybe they used to be a physicist. They have different building capabilities, different skill sets. So maybe someone is, an adult, who's in their 30s or 40s, and they figure out a way to build the ROV in a week. But then you get a high schooler or a middle schooler in, and they build it in a weekend. So the potential of open source hardware, I think, is that it's not just the atoms. It doesn't just exploit people's time and skills. It exploits all the other things in their environment. And a lot of us here are talking about how we funded our projects using, platforms like Kickstarter and stuff. But I think everyone here would agree that, almost what's a bigger part of that, for sure is a bigger part of that, is the community that you're building. You're building this network of people who are trading ideas. I think it was Tim O'Reilly who had a quote about money and how money is like gas stations. You don't go on a road trip to go to gas stations, but the gas stations are needed to go on the road trip. I feel like what we're doing is kind of like a road trip with a bunch of friends in one of those big hippie buses. And we're having an amazing time. We're doing something that is the time of our lives. We're having a great time. And every now and then, we look into our own bus and we ask if a few people can spare a little bit of cash for the gas. And that's the way I like doing it. Yeah.
Okay, I think it's much more than long-haired adventures that Eric just talked about. So to me, the next industrial paradigm, the next revolution, to me, is the open source industrial revolution. So what is open source in essence? It's an enterprise model based on accelerating innovation. We're removing the competitive waste of reinventing the wheel and leveraging the power of everybody. So I really look at it as efficiency is equivalent to open source economic development. We're creating a business model based on accelerated innovation. So to me, if companies are getting more efficient as time goes on, and that's the trend, I would say all kinds of businesses are getting leaner, more competitive and all that, I think the limit of that is open source collaboration. So I have great hope as that will be the next economy.
Great, thank you. Well, before we conclude, I just thought maybe we could do just a quick lightning round, especially directed at, we have a number of crowdfunding experts in the audience today. We're hoping to hear from you in the workshops afterwards. We also have a wider audience, many of whom may have not heard about crowdfunding until they saw a tweet this morning and decided to tune in. So for everyone who's never heard of crowdfunding until today, but now has a basic idea of what it's about, has just had it explained to them in 20 words or less. We're just going to go down lightning round style. Why is crowdfunding important, and what is it going to enable people to do in the years and decades ahead?
I think it's going to enable anyone who has a dream and a passion to benefit their community and to bring people together. It's a wonderful way to do that.
I think it'll enable people to pursue the support of their passions in a much more accessible way, and to actually learn about some of the issues that are going in the communities and also internationally by investing in them and going through the process.
To me, it's about unleashing access to collaborative development in general.
It's access to those first $20,000 that will make or break 80% of small businesses that are started. Today, there is a way for anyone to start a business.
I mean, it's intensely American. It's so much like our roots. It's sleek, it's powerful and entrepreneurial, it's incredibly flexible, and you take the power straight to the people who want to support you.
I think passion is a huge part of success, and when people are passionate, they can do amazing things. This takes the numbers and puts them in a backseat. It allows passion to be in the driver's seat, and passion will make it so the numbers can fill in later.
Great. Well, thank you. Let's give these champs a round of applause. Thank the 6 of you and our other 6, all 12 champions, for their extraordinary contributions to the country and to the world as champions of change. And now to close us out, it's my pleasure to welcome to the podium Paulette Aniskoff, who's Deputy Assistant to the President and Director of the White House Office of Public Engagement, which is co-hosting this great event today. Paulette, come on up.
And thank you all for being here. Welcome to the White House. We often have diverse groups of people come in as champions of change, but we have never had the kind of diversity that allows someone who created fruit snacks and created an underwater robot on one stage. So I think this is an amazing group, and just like you mentioned, so American. This is just a really amazing thing. And one of the things I came to do to close out is just to tell you a little bit about our office and make sure that you all know how you can support public engagement throughout this process, folks in the audience, throughout your hometowns as well. I've actually spent my career organizing people, and you all organize people in a really unique way. I have so much respect for what you do as a human organizer. I recently spent 3 years at FEMA, and I ran their community engagement when it comes to disasters, preparing for disasters, responding for disasters. And before that, I was an organizer on campaigns and a myriad of other ways that organizing my community really meant to me. So one of the things that I have taken away from this experience that I've had is that great ideas start at the local level. And I think the president says this consistently. The best ideas are never going to come from Washington. They're going to come from the community. And you all were chosen because you really exemplify that. And it's something that means a lot to the president. This is why we serve as the front door of the White House here in the Office of Public Engagement. We want to bring people together to talk, to share ideas, to network, to make sure that they're serving each other and solving problems together. We get a chance to really find the gold nuggets and bring them in together and see what else they can do together. So we want to make sure that we're highlighting what you do, that we're helping build coalitions across the country, and connecting you not just to government, but to each other and to other resources that you find. Solving any problem, of course, requires some leadership, vision, collaboration, and innovation. And again, I've just not seen a group that so exemplifies this after reading your stories and bios last night. It's really amazing. We can all learn a lot from the champions we've met today. Organizers always have an ask. Yours is on funding and other things. My ask, and we always have one here, is to make sure that we've got an ask for our audience. And today, for every story that's shared, we've got other folks that are also doing similar engagement, things across the country that are really innovative. We want to make sure that you're joining in their efforts to support them. We want to make sure you're sharing the stories, whether it's just getting a tweet out or whether it's talking to folks in your hometown, to make sure that we share this kind of innovation and what an American story this is. For those of you in the audience, we want to make sure that you all take that task home. And we want to thank you all again for bringing change to your community. This is really an amazing group. So thank you so much.